Lows in the mid-30s. Sunday, partly sunny with a 20% chance of rain and snow showers. Highs in the lower 40s. Sunday night, partly cloudy with a chance of snow showers, possibly mixed with rain showers. Lows in the upper 20s. Chance of precipitation 30%. Monday, partly sunny with a 20% chance of snow showers, possibly mixed with rain showers. Highs in the upper 30s. Here is the nearshore forecast for waters within 5 nautical miles from shore for the following: Whitehall to Pentwater, Michigan. Small craft advisory in effect until 2 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time Tuesday. Through early evening, south winds 15 to 25 knots. Sunny. Waves 3 to 5 feet. Tonight, southwest winds 10 to 15 knots backing south toward daybreak. Mostly clear. Waves 3 to 5 feet subsiding to 2 to 3 feet toward daybreak. Tuesday, south winds 15 to 25 knots. Mostly sunny. Waves 3 to 5 feet. Tuesday night, southwest winds 10 to 20 knots. Partly cloudy. Waves 2 to 4 feet subsiding to 1 to 3 feet toward daybreak. Wednesday, north winds 10 to 20 knots. Partly sunny. Waves 1 to 2 feet. Wednesday night, northeast winds 10 to 20 knots. Mostly cloudy. Waves 1 to 2 feet. Thursday, northeast winds 15 to 20 knots. Rain showers likely. Waves 1 to 3 feet. Friday, north winds 15 to 20 knots. Partly sunny with a chance of rain showers. Waves 2 to 4 feet. Saturday, southwest winds around 20 knots. Partly sunny. Waves 3 to 5 feet. Here is the nearshore forecast for waters within 5 nautical miles from shore for the following: Grand Haven to Whitehall, Michigan. Small craft advisory in a
Good evening, good folks, and welcome to the City of Muskegon City Commission work session for this Monday, March 11th, 2024. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner German,
Here.
Commissioner Gorman, absent. Commissioner Cochin, absent. Vice Mayor St. Clair,
Here.
Mayor Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Kilgo,
Present.
Commissioner Keener, absent.
Thank you. All right, first up on our new business is we have the Shoreline Drive Road Diet Pilot Report and Study Results. Much awaited.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. This is the summary and final report of the Shoreline Drive Road Diet Pilot. If you'll recall, we have Progressive AE helping us out with this effort. Chris Zoll is here and will be presenting the meat and potatoes of the study. But just to kind of reset the stage for our new commissioners and the public, this is the second phase of the study. The first phase was in October of 2022. This portion refers to the additional pilot study efforts that were done over the late summer and early fall this year. And a lot of, as you'll see, a lot of the same conclusions as were reached the first time, with a little bit more detail and a little bit more specificity, I guess. So without further ado, here's Chris, and he will have a presentation to share the results for you to view.
Thank you, Director Vanderhyde. Maybe you just introduce yourself and your organization, please, sir.
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Zoll. I'm the Transportation Practice Leader with Progressive AE. It's been a pleasure working with you guys on these last two pilot experiments. I do have a presentation prepared that hopefully is flowing up.
Well, welcome back.
How do I adjust the share? Thank you. All right, so I have a brief agenda to discuss, talking about the results of pilot phase one, the public engagement, our additional study in 2023, and brief next steps, as well as some additional dialogue with Mr. Vanderhyde afterwards. So in looking at the existing conditions for the road diet in phase one, we recall back that we had a significant opportunity with some maintenance work that was planned for Shoreline Drive. This was done in conjunction with the DOT. We were able to set up a pilot for the area that's shown highlighted here in blue. That was essentially our study area in this section of Shoreline Drive. It does carry between 12,000 and 20,000 vehicles per day. The existing road operates with a very good level of service. Level of service A, and we remember that level of service is average delay per vehicle, with A being little to no delay and F being congested or significantly congested. The speed limits of 40 to 45 miles an hour throughout the study area, which results in approximately 20 to 25 speeding citations issued. It's important to recognize how speed impacts safety. Shoreline Drive has exhibited historically safety concerns for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists due to its design speed. Reduced vehicle traffic speeds makes the streets generally safer for everyone. Street design is a key component of having safe streets, not just enforcement, although enforcement is this is important to making it safer for all road users. So the graphic on the right here, you'll see the chance of surviving a vehicle crash as a pedestrian at 20 miles an hour is 90%. But we just go, we double that to 40 miles an hour and your chance of surviving goes all the way down. The impact of speed is critical when it relates to the safety of vulnerable road. We initially started with some data collection in July of 2022 with an operating condition and the typical full unimpacted operations of the roadway to get a baseline condition. Maintenance of project occurred in October of 22, which included closing one travel lane in each direction. We then went out and collected some additional data, which showed the reduction, the function of the road operated acceptably during the reduction, and the decision to follow up with an additional study period because we had missed kind of the summer months, right, in October. That was directly based on some of the feedback that we heard from our public engagement. That set us up for some future data collection. So here's the data collection points throughout the corridor, including Webster and Muskegon. We wanted to make sure that we weren't negatively impacting the parallel routes that some may choose. And see that we collected vehicle speeds and vehicle volumes on all of these corridors. All right, we did go through a public engagement process, both with the 2022 pilot as well as the 2023. We had an online survey, we had 2 in-person events. Some of that feedback helped us inform the 2023 study so that we were capturing more of the event months throughout the summer. We wanted to make sure that the road condition being reduced to the 3-lane capacity, if you will, would work during the special events over the summer. And that's exactly what we studied with the 2023. Getting into the data and analysis and looking at the volumes. The volumes from 2022 to 2023 showed actually a reduction in all 3 categories along shoreline. The weekday morning period, which is the AM rush on the way to work, the weekday afternoon period as we're heading home from work typically, and then Saturdays from 11 to 6 p.m. we also saw a slight decrease between 2022. So comparing the traffic volumes along Muskegon, Webster, and with before and after, generally the weekdays decreased. There was some increase on both Muskegon and Webster during the weekend periods, but recall that most of the festivals and activities typically occur over the weekend as well. So I don't have a specific correlation, but do believe that we were collecting data when you were having events. Moving to speed, we see that the 85th percentile speed was collected along all 3 corridors. Vehicle speeds are reduced in most locations. And again, we talked about how speed factors into safety. Seeing speed reductions in the neighborhood of 7 and 8 miles per hour is significant. Most other speed studies and speed improvements, whether it's bulb outs or narrower lanes or otherwise, are happy to achieve a speed reduction closer to 3 miles an hour. For us to have gotten all the way up to 7 and 8 miles an hour is a very meaningful change. All right, so how does the road operate? So queuing and level of service in particular, as you might expect and probably as you observed, the queue doubled in most instances. Instead of having 2 lanes, we have 1 lane, the queue doubles. But as the signals are timed and operated, we were able to maintain acceptable levels of service throughout the corridor. In an urbanized area, level of service D is generally considered acceptable, and we were able to maintain that for all intersections through the study area. We then measured travel times throughout the corridor. And so as you can see, in the weekday mornings, we saw a 3-minute increase throughout the corridor. Oh wait, I'm sorry. That's a 3-second increase throughout the corridor. So the amount of impact that we were having on average per vehicle is almost negligible. You know, the 14 seconds, you'll probably notice 30 seconds throughout the corridor. Generally, a relatively small impact in the overall amount of time as it took to travel through the corridor. All right, so with the traffic performance, the results summary, the traffic volumes on Shoreline Drive decreased, particularly during weekdays. I don't know if people decided that they wanted to take a different route, and they did so. Traffic volumes along Muskegon and Webster do show some increase, but they were not significant. The northbound traffic did have the most impact, especially on traffic speeds decrease on Shoreline, Muskegon, and Webster, and the travel times do increase, but remain acceptable. Again, those were the very small increases, nothing more than 30 seconds, through the entire corridor. All right, let's move on to talk a little bit about some of the next steps. So we've seen the data and the analysis that shows the impacts to traffic operations. We're not really demonstrating a conversation around the change that it means for the community, how it impacts our culture of mobility, and a significant amount of concern that we heard from the citizens that attended the public events that said, I don't understand why we're doing this. What is the purpose of this change? What are the outcomes that we're looking to achieve? So I'd like to suggest that the work that we've done is a great point of data. We've learned a lot through this process, but we have a lot of questions that are yet unanswered. There's more work to do to understand what the opportunities are, how much we want to make that connection between the waterfront and the downtown. We're seeing some waterfront communities embracing the waterfront in particular, such as the city of Detroit. They've been investing in their Riverside Trail right downtown, and it's being wonderfully received. It really is engaging the community, bringing pride to neighborhoods that haven't had access to the waterfront, and raising the quality of life for residents and business owners alike. So there are opportunities to continue to further plan, further study, and invest in implementation. There are grant programs that are available now for us to consider. The Safe Streets for All in particular has a strong focus around vulnerable road users. Grant dollars are available right now. So are there any questions about the study in particular that
Commissioners? Commissioner Kilgo.
Thank you for joining us this evening. So I've spoken with some constituents this week about heavier truck traffic that was diverted during the study time. Do any of your numbers show types of vehicles or just numbers? Because you said that there were some increased numbers on Webster and Muskegon during the study. Do your numbers at all show, okay, these were double axle and or higher, bigger, heavier vehicles? Because if by chance the city decided to make changes to Shoreline Drive permanently, there are some that think that it would lead to a more permanent diversion of traffic onto Muskegon or Webster, and that they don't want to see heavy vehicles on those roads. So I was just curious if the study said anything to more of the diverted traffic that went into the downtown area.
Yeah, great, great question. Thank you for that. And I agree with your constituents that I wouldn't want more heavy trucks rolling down next to my business or nearby neighborhood either. The data that we collected does include the vehicle classifications. I do not currently have it summarized in the report, but we'd be glad to add that to the report so we have that understanding of how the heavy vehicles dispersed in the network.
Thank you. No further questions for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgo. Yeah, I think that would be useful insight. Commissioner German.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I greatly appreciate it. That was one of the questions that I had. So I just kind of did some searching when it comes to trucks and heavy vehicles. But one of the cons also that they talked about to my research is when there's a two-way left turn lane in the turning lane, it's pretty difficult for drivers to get into that left lane once the traffic is very congested. What did the study show? Or did it show anything involving vehicles when those high peak times when it comes to left turns or accessing another lane?
Yeah, good question about the left turning volume impacting maybe the through volume if the queue got longer than the storage length available for the left the boulevard section. In general, as we summarized in the report, the level of service for all intersections ended up operating at level of service D or better. I don't recall specifically seeing any left turn queues that were exceeding the storage length that was impacting the through capacity. Doesn't mean it didn't happen occasionally, but it didn't happen routinely. Thinking about the future of the corridor, if we're to re-envision how it's geometrically constructed, I'm not certain that, in that process, we would be able to build the left turn lanes as long as they would need to be to facilitate the traffic. So we would be able to avoid that type of situation with improvements in the future, or however that road is to be reconstructed.
Okay.
Its footprint is quite wide right now, and we may end up finding a way to repurpose some of that and narrowing that footprint.
Okay, so basically, I guess in the first phase, if something like this was to pass, the reconstruction of the road would actually be wide enough to actually later add that left lane for turning. That's basically what you're saying, if I follow you correctly.
Right, the right-of-way is quite wide now. Future configuration would allow for a turn lane of the appropriate length. We would also have the opportunity to add left turn signals if the capacity needed it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner German. Any other questions at this time? Commissioner Cochin.
Yes, thank you so much, and pardon me for my tardiness. One of the questions I had when I was reading this was on page 4 of the information under the traffic volumes. It says that the data collected at 4th and 7th Street intersections were reviewed and indicated similar trends. Can you explain why you chose 4th and 7th Street to collect data at?
Yeah, so throughout the corridor, we wanted to make sure that we were getting appropriate spacing so that we would get real-life traffic operating conditions that weren't being impacted by adjacent signals or overlapping impacts. And so the activities at 4th and 7th, the pedestrian activities were observed to be higher in those locations, and the traffic signals functioning was a part of that consideration, and that provided us what we felt like was a reasonable perspective of the operations of the corridor.
So, just to confirm, when you were doing your initial assessment, you determined that those two locations, you did pedestrian studies as well as traffic studies beforehand, correct?
Correct. Our turn and movement volumes included the pedestrian numbers at those intersections.
Any follow-up, Commissioner Cochin?
I've got lots of questions, but you can get somebody else.
All right. Vice Mayor St. Clair.
Can you repeat one point that you made that I want to make sure that I heard correctly? You said that the data showed significant, by your terminology, significant speed reduction on Shoreline Drive, but also that overlapped onto Webster and Muskegon. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct.
Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, I do think the volume impact or the speed impacts on Webster and Muskegon also related to the busyness of the data collection times. We were intentionally, so with the 2022 data collection effort, it was in the fall. We had missed the busy times of the summer. We were asked to make sure that we understood operations during the busy time. So we collected during the festival weekends and saw more traffic and slower speeds when compared to. So it's difficult to fully say, but the more volume, the slower it's going. There was a correlation there with the activity in town.
Okay, thank you.
That was an interesting data point
Yes, I was.
with regard to Muskegon Webster traffic during that time period. Commissioner Cochin?
Yeah, so Vice Mayor Sinclair actually asked one of the questions that I had, which was appreciated. I was looking at the calendar from July of 2022 and the dates that were chosen to do the study, and I think you touched base on this already a little bit, that there was not as much going on, and when looking at that calendar, there was not a lot going on. So when you were choosing to compare the two, do you think it's a fair analysis, or are you suggesting another study?
So under summertime event conditions, the data shows the street operations are reasonable. The network with the reduced capacity operates at level service D or better. It includes slower speeds and it handles higher volumes. I think that is a good lesson learned. Some of the next steps that I think are more important is related to the feedback that we had from the community around what is the point, what is the purpose, what are we looking to achieve. I think that just understanding that it is feasible isn't enough of an understanding for the community to say, I'm interested in that, or I understand the vision, or I want to know more, or I'm willing to support a more vibrant downtown with this type of change if X, Y, and Z happen. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to suggest that some of the next steps are really about envisioning what's possible, knowing that a reduction in capacity is feasible. And I think that's some of the work that the community needs to wrap its arms around, think about what it means to embrace the waterfront or not, think about what the future of downtown wants to look like, so that we can have a more intentional approach to what that change to shoreline is really intended to accomplish.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I know that Jay touched base on the truck issue as well, and I've had constituents reach out to me with concerns about the increase in traffic on those streets, and when I was looking at the data, I did see an increase. And so I agree. I think that there's some concerns among the citizens in regards to how we want to do that if we were to go forward with this. But I really appreciate you putting this data together and coming out here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cochin. Vice Mayor St. Clair?
Thanks. So for the commissioners that weren't here yet when we did the October study, can you talk a little bit about why we did that study, what the circumstances were surrounding why we chose to just randomly pick time in October?
Yeah, what may have felt random had a little more methodology behind it, and it it did relate to the opportunity that we had specifically with the DOT. The Shoreline is a state of Michigan owned and operated roadway. We don't just change its configuration whenever we want to. They had that maintenance project that's happening that October. He had the interest in this pilot. We aligned those interests to study during that time period and gather some community feedback in the process. And that's where we got the additional input about studying it over the summer, right? Hey, we missed the busy season. This isn't a fair representation. That's why we did it again in '23.
And there was some discussion before that about that being an opportunity for us to see in a pretty low impact way to the community, because for anybody who wasn't around or doesn't remember, the road had to be closed because of construction, and it was going to happen whether we counted cars or not. So we took the opportunity to run a traffic study while the road was already closed, so that we could have a better idea of what the impact would be on the traffic flow in a controlled setting that wasn't summertime festival season, and used that data to inform our decision to go ahead and do the whole study in the summer, because that data showed that the impact of the construction was minimal.
There was some cost savings between the two agencies to overlap the work at the same time.
Thank you, Vice Mayor St. Clair. Yeah, I think there was an incremental approach and one in which we could realize those cost efficiencies at the same time. Commissioner Kilgo.
Yes, thank you. So just for my knowledge, and maybe the general public if they don't know, the city of Muskegon cannot change Shoreline Drive without MDOT's approval. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. It is an MDOT road. They have been a good and willing partner, but when it comes down to brass tacks, they are the owner and have the jurisdiction.
Thank you.
And this study was in part instigated by MDOT, saying that their computational modeling had suggested that it was feasible to do this road reconfiguration, but they wanted to see real world data being collected at the same time and analyzed to reinforce their computational modeling that got us to this point.
They have been a good, willing, and cautious partner to make sure that we were looking, gathering enough data, understanding the adjacent impacts, and understanding the community's interest. Have been a good partner through the process.
Thank you. Commissioner German.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to talk about the Vision Zone plan that I was reading up on. Now, as you talked, and I do agree with speed and how that, if someone was accidentally hit crossing that road, it would reduce probably the casualty of that individual. Although that traffic is, people are going down the other roads doing the study, the Western and Muskegon, which is part of the area that I oversee in that Nelson area. With those lanes as narrow and the traffic flowing through Shoreline Drive, when we talk about safety, there's some concerns that I have. Just say, for instance, if it's a peak hour and then you have an accident where ambulance or some paramedics have to get through. Now, that's a concern because now you have that condensed area. I mean, has that been considered in the study? And if so, how are you looking to handle that?
Yeah, very good question. So if there is a crash, we only have one through lane. What happens? Right? What happens during that time period. I don't know that there were any reported crashes that created a significant amount of backup during the study period. Do you recall? Doesn't mean it couldn't happen.
Right.
But there are busy three-lane roads, all over the place that have that same type of situation. That if the travel lane does become blocked, an alternate route is going to need utilized. Often, the duration of those incidents is fairly acute, right? Fairly short, and so the crash occurs. If it's not a fatality, they're out there assessing the situation, removing the vehicles, sweeping up, and getting traffic flowing again relatively quickly.
Yeah.
In thinking about how we're designing our roads, I think it's important to recognize that we value the network, right? That we're not relying on any one road for all of our mobility needs. We have a network intentionally. So when capacity is constrained in a certain area, there are other options. We don't want Webster or Muskegon to become the primary other options, but we do need them when Shoreline maybe isn't available for that short period of time. And thinking about how we're designing our road network to operate, designing for one incident, reduction of that one available travel lane that occurs seldomly, may be over designing during all the rest of the periods that incident isn't occurring. So it's a balance.
And you probably got the history about Muskegon and Webster back in the days where at one time you could go probably 50, 60 miles an hour. And I could see, tying in the residential area to the downtown because of crossing it in the school that was there at that time. With Shoreline Drive, as a bypass going around the city, I'm still struggling to see how that's going to impact I guess, the quality of life for the city of Muskegon. I mean, I do know we're developing on the waterfront.
If we're unable to preserve the slowed urban environment context of Webster and Muskegon, and we didn't do it right? The balance that we're looking to achieve is that walkable, safe downtown experience that also has access to the waterfront. So we can't fully take away Shoreline Drive. We would go right back to what Muskegon and Webster was, and nobody wants that. That's failure. That's not what we're trying to accomplish. But given the analysis that we've done, we see that there is excess capacity, and we also have the history of crashes through that shoreline area that shows it is an area of concern, especially for vulnerable road users.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner German. Vice Mayor St. Clair.
Full of questions. This might be semantics and it might not be a question for you, but I'm wondering, is there a difference in between a business route and a bypass? I hear that used interchangeably, and it has been explained to me that a bypass is to avoid the city, but a business route is to take you through the city, to the city.
I don't know that I know the textbook definition. When you look at our interstate system, I-75, 475, right? I-96, 196, 496, etc. They often serve as, bypasses to certain areas. The business route are often not as high of an order. They're not restricted access roadways, but that they are signed as a business route, typically through the urban area, that are often utilized as emergency routes if the bypass isn't available. So I do believe there is a meaningful difference between the two, but I'm not certain that it applies best.
Okay, thank you. And I have one more question. Again, this might not be a you question. It might turn out to be a Director Vanderhyde question. But you did say a 3-lane road in answering somebody else's question. You referenced a 3-lane road, and what we had during the pilot study was a 2-lane road. Is that accurate? Like, can you talk about the difference?
Yep, so with the boulevarded section, we have the left turn lanes that are available at the intersection. So you count the number of lanes at the intersections, it's effectively 3 lanes. So whether the boulevard exists or not, the effective operation at the signalized intersection is 3 lanes.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't say boulevard more than 3 lane, but operationally it's very, very similar.
Okay. So as long as there is a turn lane at any point, then we consider that a 3-lane road? Is that
Whenever 3 lanes are present,
okay?
right? Whether it's, one in each direction and
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so during the study period, it was kind of in between. It wasn't
Yeah.
fully 3-lane, like the traditional. You can always had a dedicated turn lane. There were some intersections that you could. Other intersections was blocked off. That was just a 2-lane. So a little bit of.
given the limited access in the
Sure.
corridor, which was intentionally a part of the initial design, the turning pockets are available where turns are permitted.
Okay.
Really, a lot of benefit to providing a lane where there isn't that space to turn, except for maybe emergency vehicles.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Like if there was a consistent center lane, then emergency vehicles could get through.
Yeah.
Generally. Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Cochin.
Thank you. A constituent reached out to me in regards to questions about the data collection and said that there was data collection down at 8th and 9th, but I didn't see that in the report. Is that accurate?
There's a traffic volume collected.
Was traffic volume at 8th and 9th? Okay, I must have missed that in the report.
Well, it's coming onto Muskegon and Webster, so that would be 9th there. The traffic volume is being collected.
Okay.
Yeah, so my screen isn't being displayed, but my data collection slide, we did collect traffic volume counts at 8th and 9th.
Okay, thank you.
Follow up, Commissioner Cochin?
Yeah, follow-up question. So, we didn't have any collection on any other side roads. So if people turned off of Webster or Muskegon after getting on at 8th and 9th and then didn't get off there where it connects to Shoreline Drive, we didn't collect that data, correct?
Correct. Yep, the study was primarily about the through movements, comparing Shoreline to Webster and Muskegon.
Yes, Mr. Manager.
And Director Vanderhyde, correct me if I'm wrong, but during the summer study, that's when Houston was getting redone, or there's an overlap there.
That was the last. Oh wait,
Yeah.
Houston.
Houston and Sanford.
Yeah.
It was. I'd have to go back and look at the exact dates. Houston may have been complete, or pretty well complete by the time data was gathered. Sanford would not have been.
If there's no commissioners or more questions.
I was gonna ask. Welcome, Commissioner Keener.
Thank you.
We are right now just reviewing the findings of the study, the Shoreline Drive Road Diet Pilot Study. So if you have any questions right now on the study itself or the data collected?
I don't.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kilgo.
Yeah, one last question for me. The studies, the study was in place, or yeah, the study was in place because we want to improve and make sure that pedestrians have safety. In your opinion, and money does not grow on trees, so it would cost someone money somewhere, but would pedestrian bridges increase safety if we were able to find spots to put them over Shoreline Drive?
Question. Uh, the question about grade separated crossings, whether it's a tunnel or a bridge, did come up in our public feedback sessions. I was asked a fair amount. Will they increase safety? The short answer to that is yes. They are very expensive, and they are not all implemented equally well. If the primary path or the desired path for all constituents is to use that grade separated crossing, then we find a lot of success. If there's an alternative that is shorter, that is less inconvenient, I've seen many locations that struggle with that. Oftentimes, that's the old school crossing, steps up and over. There are many crashes that occur right underneath that truck, because the amount of distance that you have to travel to go up and over is often 3 times as long as just making your way. So if we can find a way to design that the preferred route uses a grade separated crossing, then I think we'll find a lot of success. I think that's going to be challenging given the topography. Maybe not the most perfect example, but off the top of my head, Las Vegas Boulevard has a lot of grade separated crossings between businesses. And you don't have to go down to the street level at all, and it is the most convenient way to cross the street, and tons of people use it. That's kind of what that example means.
Any other questions right now, Mr. Manager?
Mr. Zoll, so from the study data, you mentioned that acceptable levels of traffic flow are D and above. Can kind of a two-part question. One, can you kind of give an illustrative example of what an A flow is, a B flow, C and D? I'm just thinking we've got a lot of high achievers in here, and a D grade might not be great. But also from looking at the report data, the overall traffic flow in the existing and future conditions were pretty much A's and B's. Where the D's came into play was in left-hand turns for the most part. Okay.
Yep. So the grading scale A through F uses average delay per vehicle. And I don't remember each category exactly by number, but A is generally 0 to 10 seconds of delay on average. Level of service of D is up to 55 seconds per delay on average. And it's those conflicting movements that have the most capacity constraint, a la the left turns, right? So the average delay, we all wait a little bit longer to make a left-hand turn usually than as if we were going straight through. So, that benchmark of level of service D is traffic is still moving. We're not gridlocking the network, but we're also not in free flow condition where we can travel at whatever speed anybody desires.
Follow.
Yes, please.
So the overall the through flow of traffic is flowing at generally A's or B's in this modeling and from what the study showed. Can you give us some examples of other A and B flowing roads that might have delayed left turns in West Michigan?
Yep, so on my way here this evening, traveling down Apple Avenue, right around the hour, 4:30, 5 o'clock, traffic was still moving relatively well. We did, have some buildup at some of the intersections when we caught a red light, which is to be expected, but we cleared that cycle every phase. So I didn't sit there and not make it through the light right? So that's kind of that A, B, or C level of service. I was slowed by a vehicle turning left in that 4-lane section. With a full lane next to me, I had to stop and wait. And so I was delayed some because of that left turning movement. Left turn lane would have been provided, I would have had more of a continuous flow. With these odd lane sections, with these 3-lane sections, we all are subject to the lowest common denominator. The slowest moving vehicle in the queue is setting the pace for the rest of us. So that generally is a positive safety impact for those roadways because it adjusts the driver's behavior and the vehicle speeds. Now, it does potentially create some other issues if people start passing in the turn lane, which is not legal, but I've had other communities have made complaints about that. I don't know how to better describe level of service D and above in a reasonable operation. Any other examples that you'd like to point to? Yeah, whenever you're in free flow condition, you get to choose whatever speed you'd like to travel.
I guess like an example that's coming to mind for me would be, at least locally, Holton Road, kind of by Meyer in North Muskegon. It's a 3-lane, probably flowing at about 55, and then there's a left-hand turn lane where you can get into. But if you're turning left, you might be waiting a little bit to make that turn. And certainly there's examples on Henry Street as well. There's more lights there, so that might not be quite as much of a free flow, but just trying to think of examples locally. But also, kind of what I'm hear you saying is from a traffic engineer standpoint, B's and C's aren't necessarily a bad thing because it can have a traffic calming effect, which can be good. Because in theory, an A could mean that, as you pointed out in the beginning of the presentation, folks going faster than the posted speed limit resulting in citations or an increased probability of accidents.
Yeah, I would suggest that in many urban situations, the preferred level of service to design to would be level of service D. That is creating that environment in which the vehicles are moving slow enough that the pedestrians are having reasonable access to the roadway network, and our overall speeds, right, are generally slower. So from a planner's point of view, or maybe a storefront operator, the more cars sitting out front of my business or driving by, the better, right? Your D, E, and F. But then from a traffic engineer's standpoint that's focused on capacity and throughput, they'll lean towards the A, B's, and C's. And so really it kind of is that D level that the network is still moving and functioning, but it's being done at a scale that's safe and more comfortable for all.
Thank you for that. Speaking of Holton Road, in 120, I remember last year when I was looking at the average annual driver traffic on different roadways, I'd found that on that roadway, just off of the causeway east of there, that it has comparable daily traffic to Shoreline Drive, and that is a 3-lane road, pass through each way and then the turning lane. So I just thought that was interesting. I was trying to find a comparable roadway that had similar traffic or traffic volumes, and how the traffic flow was there. And that was a comparable roadway that I'd found last year, was that section of Holton Road between the causeway and Meyer right there. And in some sections, it's actually more traffic than Shoreline Drive, which was surprising.
In my experience, the threshold for that level service D reasonable operation for a 3-lane road in an urban context is up to 20,000, 18,000, 22,000, depending on the community. Volumes along Shoreline Drive generally fall within the industry acceptable standard for a 3-lane section.
And we also see part of our desire is to slow traffic, to make safer conditions for crossings, and improve comfort level of people being able to cross freely from the waterfront to downtown, downtown to the waterfront. And people have differing levels of comfort. You know, there are certain people that are perfectly comfortable crossing the existing conditions as they are. Others who, you know, have hesitation and would prefer changes. But when I do look at M120, even though it is 3-lane, it is narrower, it still has same speeding issues. You know, it's not necessarily you narrow it and automatically is going to result in lower speeds. And so I think there's another element that we need to be looking at. How do we reduce speeds? Because that's really one of the key objectives that we're trying to accomplish here, is to reduce speeds, at least through the downtown portion of Shoreline Drive there.
So if I might,
Yeah, please.
I feel like you're describing context, and you are absolutely right. The context surrounding the operation intent of the roadway, as well as all the adjoining land uses, very much influence how drivers feel, how much pedestrian activity there is. That is super important to this type of discussion, and I feel like that's part of the vision that didn't coalesce before the study. So the future context needs to be a very important part of any future decision making.
Thank you. Vice Mayor St. Clair.
One more question. Again, this might be a Director Vanderhyde question, but maybe you can answer. So if part of our thought with this is to reduce speeds, help us understand why we can't just lower the speed limit.
That came up as a part of our public feedback as well. Speed limits have been a major conversation in the industry for quite some time. State police use an 85th percentile rule in setting speed limits. Generally, the state of Michigan typically follows that. Changing the number on the sign does not automatically change the behavior in the roadway. The different speed control techniques, so are there other ways of doing it? So education, enforcement, speed radar feedback signs, horizontal and vertical deflections, holding each other socially accountable for our behaviors. You know, hey, you know, I saw you drive by the other day, it was pretty fast. You know, my kids crossing the street, you know. And frankly, it's how we also behave, right? We are users. Are we traveling at appropriate speeds? Do we appreciate what we're? So, changing the number on the sign doesn't have generally the impact that you're looking for without some of the other treatments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor St. Clair. Commissioner Cochin.
So this isn't necessarily a question, but more of a comment, because we were discussing the speed limits and everything, and one of the things I noticed was that once we started having people getting pulled over, specifically Webster and Muskegon area, I noticed everybody around me slowing way down. And so I think that enforcement is a huge part of making sure that Shoreline Drive and our neighborhood stay safe.
I just want to provide some context around the pulling over around Muskegon and Webster. So we did have some targeted enforcement there. It was not for speeding issues there. It was people running the stop signs, because there were people in response to the study who said they were going to be coming through there intentionally running the stop signs and just ignoring them, and that was a public danger and a concern of mine. And so I'd spoken with the city manager, like, we cannot allow people just to be riding roughshod and doing as they please there. And so we did have some targeted enforcement around that. So people were just not running stop signs and endangering our community. Commissioner German.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a question on the level of service D when you mentioned about the 35.1 to 55 seconds, and I noticed that's not too far off from level E, which actually starts at 55.1. Now I'm thinking about the events and that happens downtown, and due to heavy traffic flow, high consumption of alcohol, road rage, and those things right there. So that's only like a tenth of a second off for being considered at that level E. Now that kind of raises some concerns because due to consumption of alcohol in the events, then behaviors change sometimes. People get impatient. So I guess, that turning lane that we're talking about, the left turning lane, does the study, I guess my question would be, how is the study, can you curve that? Because I could see easily it going to that level where traffic flow is backed up, and you mentioned also drivers going around, and it can get kind of, out of control. So have you considered that in the study or anything like that?
So in trying to address event traffic, it's not all that uncommon to utilize an event management plan, which may include additional traffic control devices, police officers, cones and barrels, etc. So we already impact some of the network travel pattern based on the intensity of the events. And this is not atypical for large downtown events at a stadium or concert or amphitheater. But I think most people would recognize that they wouldn't expect to travel through this corridor during an event time in the same manner that they would travel it during a rush hour. It's reasonable to expect some delay because of event happening in the downtown. Thinking about how we're designing our roads and our networks, do we want to design for that worst case scenario? Do we want to design for that 1 to 5 times a year event that happens? If we were to do that, we would be taking a very large footprint that would be at that capacity or utilization just a few times a year. But it's there 365. We have to service it. We have to enforce it. So I think a part of the expectation during the events is that we need to be able to reasonably move traffic, even though we may approach some movements operating at level service E or F during that short time period. But we recognize that the system operates as a whole, on average, reasonably. Level E or better. And again, even that is during the 2 busy times of the day. So, Christmas only comes once a year, but in traffic it happens twice a day. So if we're able to get a typical day operating for the network, then those special circumstances that are the worst case scenarios are a reasonable expectation for.
Okay, and just a follow up. Now, okay, so basically, you said it's all about the design and how you design it. And given the data that's been collected, there is a chance that possibly that could not be, I would say, it would not focus in on the traffic that the study was done for if you have, a larger crowd, those scenarios. So I guess as a professional, I would ask you, what would your recommendation be looking at this data?
Yeah, great question. Um, the traffic engineering answer to this in both the 2022 data and the 2023 data show that we're able to create a network that operates with reduced capacity on Shoreline Drive for your typical weekdays and weekends. I used to be a traffic engineer. I worked in a nearby city for 15 years and operated streets in this same way. And for me, from a traffic standpoint, reducing the capacity on Shoreline Drive would be very acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner German. Mr. Manager.
And Chris, just to clarify, when you say reduced capacity, we're simply talking about the reduction in the lanes, not necessarily the number of cars that can go through.
Reduction in lanes,
Yeah.
correct.
Yep. Thanks.
Welcome, Commissioner Gorman.
Thank you.
Do you have anything to ask? Right now, we received the presentation on the study, and reviewing the findings, and just having Q&A around the study itself, processes, and the findings therefrom. Do you have any questions at this time?
I don't think so.
Thank you. All right. This question for. I may have more questions for you, but before we get to that, question is more for Director Vanderhyde as well as Mr. Manager in terms of what your expectations are from the commission at this point in time going forward. So we've received the findings, well presented and articulated for us, and had some good Q&A around the findings themselves. But what are you looking from the commission going forward?
Sure, great question. And Chris alluded to it at the very end of his presentation, but where do we go from here is, I think, kind of the natural question that comes out of a study like this, right? We have a recommendation from a consultant that says the idea that we were hired to test, is feasible, right? So we have some things that came out of the study. We have that recommendation, right, that it would work from a traffic engineering perspective with less lanes than is there today. We also took a lot of feedback from the community, right? And we had several meetings. We had email forms that we received from quite a few folks, and I think it's no secret, right, that the feedback that we received was mostly that folks like Shoreline Drive the way that it is today. There's some nuance there, right, as to where a lot of that feedback came from, and kind of how that plays into folks' desires about Shoreline Drive, I think. But the fact of the matter is, most of the feedback that we received said they would like it to stay the way that it is today. Also, just a reminder, when we did the pilot on Shoreline Drive, that was essentially picked for us in terms of where along the corridor the study could happen. That's not to say we wanted to necessarily do it somewhere else, but MDOT specifically told us this was the only place we could do the pilot, because Moses Jones to the north and Seaway Drive to the south are under a different federal designation, and MDOT would not allow a study like this to be done in those areas. So they asked, and again, we had our own ideas to do the study in the shoreline area. So it's applicable to that area, right? So one outcome that we might interpret is that this result is specific to this section of Shoreline Drive, and we discussed even in the midst of the pilot that Shoreline Drive is different than some of the other sections of the Business 31 corridor, right? We all recognize that the Moses J. Jones portion to the north of the Shoreline Drive portion is a very different animal, right? It's 8 lanes wide, sees similar traffic, but is twice as large even as Shoreline, right? So if we zoom back out, I think It's important to recognize that Business 31 it's a corridor, right? It's an important corridor throughout our community. It involves the Seaway Drive portion, the Shoreline Drive portion, the Moses J. Jones portion, and it's designed in the context of the broader community to bring people to the downtown, right, with the Business 31 designation out, but also to provide a corridor through town, right? And that it does function that way for many folks as just to recall, Shoreline Drive didn't exist, right, 20 years ago or a little bit more. It was created in order to meet changing needs at that time, right? Roads change over time. I mean, the reason Shoreline Drive existed prior to its current condition, or didn't exist, was that most of the traffic was designed to get to places like Continental Motors and some of the other, the mall and other businesses in that area. It was more of a destination rather than a throughput, which is part of the reason it was changed, right? And even more broadly, like we can look back to the Ottawa Avenue Bridge that we're talking about removing. That used to be US 31 back before the highway was built, right? All of these roads were something different, and frankly, they all will be something different someday, right? Whether we want them to be or not. Maybe long after all of us are gone, but they will be different because the needs will change. So as a city, we plan for long-term initiatives, right? 5, 10, oftentimes even 20 years out. We're planning, we're trying to make decisions about how do we anticipate the needs of the community that far out. When we plan, we don't necessarily pick and choose, right? So for example, the master plan. When we do a master plan for the community, if we receive feedback on a certain portion of that master plan, we don't, let's say, negative feedback to some of the ideas in the master plan as it's presented to the community. We don't take that portion of the plan or the city out of the plan. We incorporate that feedback into the plan, right? And we move forward with the plan, acknowledging that feedback and planning in accordance with it, right? So I think it's important to recognize that if the Business 31 corridor is, and I believe it is, a large and important component or asset in the community, however you might feel about it, love it, hate it, right? It is something we have, it's something we have to deal with, and therefore I think it's something we have to plan for, right? And so I believe the natural outcome of an effort like this is to continue to plan, right? It's not to take this effort and say, okay, well, we did that, and move on, right? It's to say, just as we repeat the master plan, just as we repeat a waterfront plan, right? Plans have been done about the waterfront in the past by the city and other entities, and they are currently ongoing again because things have changed. So I think it's important to recognize that this effort does not end our planning efforts, right? Chris alluded to some federal grant programs that are available right now for things like this through the bipartisan infrastructure law and other initiatives like it. There's a Safe Streets for All grant. There's a Reconnecting Communities grant. Both of those grants and others similar to them are designed specifically to help communities plan around these large transportation assets or things in their community, right? I think we've got these pieces of data that came from the Shoreline Drive Road Diet pilot. In one sense, maybe they were positive to some of the goals of the study, right? They showed that we could reduce speeds, we could reduce lanes, and therefore increase safety. In some aspects, maybe they were perceived negatively. We heard pretty strongly from the community that they like it the way it is, right? Or at least some portion of the community does. Those are not necessarily the ending results of an effort, right? They are feedback that we received, and I think if we can take that information in the context of a broader study of the corridor, apply some of those same principles to the Moses J. Jones section, and hopefully reduce that section at the very least, right? I think we can. That would be a good thing. The corridor as a whole becomes a cohesive unit within itself, recognizing it does have distinct parts that serve different portions of our community, geographically and otherwise, and also recognizing that as the community around that asset changes, as the waterfront develops, as downtown is and has been developing, as other components and things around that asset change and develop, that we are planning and we are anticipating how that asset should change, and we're advocating to MDOT what those changes should be from the perspective of the city and from our citizens. So I think from my perspective, from staff's perspective, you know, the answer to what's next is to continue to plan, and I would say to apply for some of these federal grants that are available to do exactly that. And I think, frankly, this study is something that will really help an application like that, show that the city has been making efforts to determine what this asset should look like, and that as a part of a planning effort, we're invested in it, and we're serious about serving the community with the asset.
Thank you, Director Vanderhyde. And speaking of that long-term planning and Shoreline Drive in particular, we know that its final phase of construction, was only about 20 years ago, wrapped up. But the initial phase was a few years prior to that, and the planning phase for that was probably a decade before that. And that planning was taking into account different configuration and use of our downtown and what the community's needs were at that time. And so, like you said, here again, looking at the community's needs into the future and going forward. There's some of the antipathy towards the road diet I heard was because of the age of Shoreline Drive and it being so young. Why would we be looking at reconfiguring it and changing it? And there was a misunderstanding or a presumption that we were going to be going and tearing up the road and redoing it. But that's not the case. This was planning for potentially reusing or using portions of the roadway differently until such time as it needs to be reconstructed or replaced. So with that in mind, what is the approximate remaining useful lifespan of Shoreline Drive and its current configurations and conditions?
That's probably a question better for MDOT at this point than for me or the city. But I mean, just looking at industry norms, you would say that MDOT would be investing substantially, maybe not to the point of reconstruction, but investing substantially in the corridor over the next 10 years. Potentially rebuilding it completely in 20 or potentially.
Okay. So there'll be different junctures in the future in which Shoreline Drive can be reconfigured, whether it's an earlier period where there's the repairs or further down where it's completely reconstructed.
There will be different points at which the city can advocate to MDOT for changes to.
We're not the final deciding
yes.
factor.
Yes, certainly that.
I'm trying to think of the process and logistics of it. Like, for instance, let's say it is 10 years from now that there'll be an opportunity for it to be physically reconfigured, not just, restriping and differently programmed in its existing configuration, but that it's the physical construct's going to be differing in 10 years. Would that mean the commission and the city, if it wished to advocate for change and for that change to happen in that 10th year from now, would the state need to make a determination? It's like, okay, we're going to do that 10 years from now today. I'm trying to understand, like, is it today? Is it, the cutoff would be 5 years from now for a 10-year? I'm just trying to understand when that determination would need to be made for it to be incorporated into the planning of any future reconstruction. And you may not have that answer, and that's perfectly fine. I'm just trying to get some understanding.
Yeah, I definitely don't have that exact answer, but I can say that Apple Avenue is a good example, right? So, it sounded, frankly, somewhat silly when MDOT came to us in 2022 and said, we're going to rebuild Apple in 2026. We'd like to start the conversation about what that next version of Apple looks like, right? That was 4 years ahead of their physical construction. At that time, they had already been engaging with their other regions and TSCs throughout the state for years, applying for funding to make changes and rebuild Appalachia. So I would say that for the city to be able to show to the state and to the community, frankly, we have a good understanding of what that next version of Shoreline Drive needs to be when the conversations about funding and planning are happening region level within MDOT. I think it's pretty close to 10 years. Maybe Chris would say something different, but I think it's pretty close.
So Mayor, very keen in picking up on infrastructure cycles. They do happen. It's a part of how the work is programmed. The clearest picture is the 5-year capital plan that the DOT uses, and that's exactly how the Apple Avenue conversation came about. But there's still planning prior to that to develop the 5-year plan. So yeah, that window of up to 10 years, and even depending on how significant the study is, like a lot of the Pels for your freeway access studies are even 20 years in advance of their major impact. So for a project like this, yeah, in that 5 to 10 year range of setting up for that future improvement is very appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I'll say the results of the study and the findings align with my experience. You know, anecdotally, I drove Shoreline Drive every single day, multiple times a day. You know, I work downtown. I live in the NIMS neighborhood, so I was traveling a lot, and I was intentionally taking the full back and forth, not getting off at my normal spot, but intentionally taking it back and forth and taking it at all different times of the day, and trying to get a feel for what people were experiencing. And I personally experienced very minimal delay during certain, like Unity Festival. There was delay. I mean, you got that was the second largest festival that happens in our downtown, and I experienced a delay, you know, around that time. But otherwise, it was pretty free flowing. I mean, there were times that I experienced zero delay. Like it was just right through. And so I do see from my personal experience and these findings that it does appear to be feasible from a traffic flow perspective and that categorization. You know, A and B, the flow through traffic is A and B, and we do see some delay at the turnoffs, which could be mitigated to some extent if we weren't satisfied with, you know, a C or D at the turnoffs. That could be mitigated with future design. Or if we want to say no less than C, as the manager said, we got some high achievers on the commission, so we may not want anything less than C, but you know that could be incorporated in that if the commission wished to move forward and the city wished to advocate and the state said, yes, we're going to do this. And I think this process was helpful, at times painful, but helpful. Helpful for us to get actual data and understand the outputs of the study, reinforcing the state's computational modeling. So it gives us a data framework that then intersects with our various different other planning efforts. You know, the master land use plan that our Director Vanderhyde just spoke about, or Imagine Muskegon Lake Plan, or the study that's going to be getting underway with the Smith Group and the city and the county and other downtown property owners, trying to create. You mentioned the Detroit River Walk earlier, trying to create something comparable in our downtown waterfront that's integrated and publicly accessible. And at the same time, on our agenda tomorrow, we have the Greenway study that we're looking at potentially supporting. And so this data will then help with that planning process of the Greenway and then the Smith Group study as well. So even if the commission says, no, we don't want to entertain moving forward whatsoever with narrowing Shoreline Drive, I still see value in the data that's collected, and I appreciate the process nonetheless, regardless of the pain points that we experienced throughout. As I had said, you know, there should be no surprise. You know, as I said last year when we moved forward with the second phase, that I personally am much more focused on Moses Jones Parkway, at least the sections immediately north and south of Marquette Avenue. That's where my mind is, and that's where my focus is. And it was explained then that we needed to complete this study before we could give serious attention or consideration, or the state would, give serious attention and review of the Moses Jones Parkway section. That's where I'm still most keenly interested in personally. Improving that interconnectivity between our Jackson Hill and Angel, and by extension Marquette neighborhood, with our waterfront and with our core downtown. That 8 lanes it's unnecessary to have it's a concrete or asphalt chasm river separating our lived communities from the magnificent amenity that is Muskegon Lake and the commercial activity of our core downtown. So that's still where my interest is. I do think that still want to see us take careful attention and concerted effort to how we can take measures, even before, as I also mentioned last year, reviewing that Imagine Muskegon Lake plan of the intersection repairs and what can we do. Because even if the commission says, yes, let's advocate for this and move this forward with a road diet, and the state signs off on it, that's still, years away. So what can we do in the meantime or in lieu of those intersection repairs or other steps that we can do to provide traffic calming or improve safety? Where do you see that process going, or next steps in terms of how we can further evaluate intersection repairs and other traffic?
I probably should have elaborated a little bit further on my recommendation when asked by Commissioner German. I do believe that the road would function with fewer lanes, as we've been discussing. However, without the engagement process, without the vision for the corridor, without the planning components to understand why this change would make my life better, why it would improve the community, what would be the benefits. And I know that the traffic works in that condition, but we also need more than just a traffic reason to make this type of change for our downtown. It's more than just a traffic question. So some of the things that can happen between now and later is to continue to have conversations like this and about this. We're talking about our culture of mobility. This isn't the only spot in town where we have traffic issues and concerns, right? And infrastructure doesn't change overnight. It is a slower process. So in talking about Moses Jones, there's a glaring opportunity for change there. How does that relate to the potential timing and operation here? Do we have limited resources? Of course. Where do we put those dollars first? Where do the opportunities align up first? So understanding the DOT capital plan, looking at your capital plan, looking at your non-motorized network, looking at your waterfront plans. All of these are inputs to making the right choices at the right times. So you might need to invest in some pop-up short-term improvements to help influence some of the traffic patterns for a period of time. You may need some additional enforcement in certain areas to make sure that you're getting the behaviors that you're looking for. You may need to do some educational pieces with drivers or certain demographics of the community. You may want to, do you guys have a Vision Zero? You may want to consider looking at a Vision Zero plan. This is an approach that 0 is the right number of serious and fatal injuries on our roadways. Many cities have adopted them. The state uses towards 0 deaths. And plans like this, right, are all parts of those inputs in how we make the right decisions with our infrastructure, throughout the process. Sorry, I might have been a little bit blunt about my outcome as it relates to the traffic study without giving the context of the setup to get to the right decision at the right time.
Thank you. Mr. Manager?
To kind of build on what Director Vanderheide was saying about next steps in planning, I think one of the great things that this study has given us is a tool to look back to and say that the modeling that the state has shown about how changes in traffic patterns aren't going to impact or negatively impact different things related to the traffic flow through the community was shown to work in real life scenarios. So as we move forward with that planning process, and if there are questions about if the modeling is accurate, we have something to point back to and say we have the data from two different studies in 2022 and 2023, which shows that the modeling that MDOT has put forward or that our traffic engineers have put forward are upheld in a real world environment. And so it helps us make more impactful planning decisions moving forward and having those discussions more freely about what would we like to see, and then being able to take that information on, what we would ideally like to see, whether it's on Moses Jones or another section of business route, down Seaway Drive, business route 31, or through the downtown, and how does that look, input those data points and get results and know that we have a high level of reliability there, that what we're seeing in the data is what is in reality will be the case. That's one of the big takeaways from this report from where I'm sitting, and allows us to move forward with what we want our community to look like as part of those bigger plans that we've been talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. So, that at this point in time, you're not looking for the commission to give any particular direction where you are. Because there's planning, we've got different planned initiatives underway. This complements that. But, are you looking for some kind of consensus from the city commission tonight on direction?
Whether we receive specific consensus tonight or not, what I would like to propose is that we come back with a grant application for some of these federal planning efforts, like the Toward Zero or Vision Zero that Chris referenced, which is a specific outcome of the Safe Streets for All program. That we would come back to you with a formal grant proposal, and that at that time the commission would, consider holistically that effort, and this would be a piece of data that is representative of what that planning effort would provide.
Okay, thank you. I personally would support you evaluating all grant opportunities out there and bringing proposals back to the city commission for further consideration. Commissioners, Commissioner Keener?
I totally support. I just in looking at this Vision Zero, and a portion of it is behaviors, and one of my concerns is I have no problem with the road diet. I mean, it's just neither here nor there for me. I drive the speed limit. If I get there, when I get there. If I don't, I don't. Either way. But when it comes to behaviors, I have noticed that I'm wondering the interaction between our policing department and the behaviors of citizens who now know that we have a no chase. Because I personally, in the last couple of weeks, almost got hit almost 4 times because these people and their behaviors, and they know that. So I'm wondering how is the police department correlating with this road diet, and are we looking at those things where they know it's no chase and just speeding through and zipping through and not giving a care about this road diet at all and what it means, the impact means to other people?
I'll say that as specifically as it relates to the road diet, we worked closely with the police department, and they sent us a little summary of their data every week, which showed no crashes or issues that they noted within the road diet pilot. As to the no chase policy, that's probably a question for the manager or safety director, and I guess I'll lean on Chris as far as what that behaviors portion of the Vision Zero plan might be specifically referring to.
Yeah, and thinking about the culture of mobility, the state of Michigan has been an auto-centric driving culture for a very long time. If you were to visit the Pacific Northwest, if you were to go down to Atlanta, in some of these areas, I've had experiences where, as a pedestrian, I was given the priority. The vehicle would see me approaching the crosswalk, they would give me plenty of space to cross. Most of the communities in Michigan aren't that way. Aggressive driving state overall. So as we work on adjusting our behaviors, our culture of accountability as it relates to our mobility expectations, how we design the infrastructure, how we do enforcement, how we talk about safety and mobility and what we expect of each other, is how we move that needle. It isn't just any one approach to changing those outcomes. It's all of these facets, and it really boils down to each and our own individual behaviors and our values as we move through.
So is this looking at the behaviors of, because like you said, the roads are going to continue to change, things are going to continue to change. Are we looking at I guess I'm a millennial, so I don't know what the next generation is, and they're much more aggressive. My daughter tears up her car, I don't know how many times, because she's very aggressive on the road. Are we looking at those changes as well?
So the Vision Zero program, towards zero death, there's that common outcome of zero being the right number. How we get there is being done in a plethora of different ways. So I have a couple young drivers as well, and I've been imparting upon them driving behaviors and habits. Speed in particular is one that I continue to talk with them about. I've shown them some of the statistics about how speed kills, the impacts that it has, and how they need to be making these choices as responsible drivers, as responsible pedestrians, as responsible cyclists. Safety is everybody's responsibility in the world of mobility. So yeah, we are talking to the future drivers and senior drivers and everybody in between about doing their part for your safety and everybody else's safety.
Thank you.
Mr. Manager?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think there's so many different components to the, I guess to the Vision Zero network, and I don't know enough about it to speak knowledgeably on it, and the different aspects that revolve around that, regarding policing. That's I think another big thing that we could have time to dive into at a different time to be able to knowledgeably answer the questions. So
it sounds like Vision Zero might be a legislative policy committee meeting agenda item at some point in the future for review. Vice Mayor St. Clair?
Thank you. I think that, as we were talking about this last year and the year before, my primary focus was collecting data. I wanted to see what the data would show if we changed the conditions of the road so that we can make an informed decision, start to make an informed decision going forward. I think change is really hard, and as a community, I think we might be a little more resistant to change than some other communities. And I remember what Muskegon looked like 10 years ago, and I invite you all to think about what Muskegon looked like 10 years ago. And for those of you who maybe weren't here or weren't paying attention yet, we didn't have the farmers market 10 years ago. It's the 10th anniversary this summer of the farmers market opening. And the downtown was so very different. And if you look back 10 years before that, it was still even more different. And I can't envision what it's going to look like 10 years from now, but I guarantee you it's going to be different. And as a community, it's going to be really important for us to be looking forward and making plans, because it's coming. Whether we plan for it or not, it's coming. And I feel like as a community, we get caught off guard all the time by the change that happens. And it feels rushed and unplanned and like, why did we build a mall downtown? Well, why did we tear the mall down? And, I think this whole process has been an effort at changing the culture of not having things just happen to us as a community because the world around us changed, but being planful in how we move forward. And I don't have a vested interest whether we narrow the road or not. I want to follow the data. And the only way we have data to follow is if we do the work to gain it. And it's painful and uncomfortable and scary. And that's how we grow as a community. And I believe that we can do hard things. So I would entirely support continuing to look forward and however we need to do that so that we can get where we want to go on purpose.
Thank you, Vice Mayor St. Clair. Commissioner Kilgo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd be happy to look at a grant application, for doing things that are good for our infrastructure. I want us to remember we are going to be adding a lot of new pedestrians and residents downtown. So there's development, which it looks like right at 3rd or Terrace. Obviously the entrance to the Harbor 31 project. And then as Adelaide Point and Shaw Walker get renovated and filled, we're going to have a lot more cars and people in traffic. So I'd be happy to look at a grant application that, maybe we bring the Vision Zero program or we do other things to make sure our citizens are safe. And I'm all about that. I just don't think it's going to be a road diet to where we narrow down that portion of Shoreline Drive. As Vice Mayor said, we don't know what the future will bring. So let's just continue to plan for it. In those plans, some of the things that were already said yes to are coming. So I want us to keep those things in mind. And of course, our pedestrian and our citizen safety is top-notch importance. So let's continue to do things to help keep our citizens safe.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgo. And in that regard of the long-term planning piece and envisioning further into the future, like you mentioned, we are in a growth phase. And we hope to continue to be in a growth phase and bringing new businesses, new residents, more guests to our community. That's certainly going to have an impact. Another piece is technology, with self-driving vehicles. And what does that look like 10 years from now? How prominent will self-driving vehicles be, or even flying cars? Although they've been talking about flying cars for over a half century now, since Jetsons first was created. Although I did see orders being taken for flying cars. They're actually started selling them, but I think self-driving cars is probably much more of a
realistic,
more pressing possibility, and one that we need to take into account going forward. So those are other pieces of the long-term planning, and what does that look like? And even with the growth, and we were to narrow it, is it acceptable to go from a B to a C? Or, and that's a question that would need to be asked and answered at that time. I will say, and I've shared this internally with a few different people, and this ties into you're speaking earlier about that community engagement and the narrative of why do this, what are the benefits, because that's not commonly known nor understood, which is contributing to such significant opposition to this. And what I've shared internally with some folks is that even if we thought and think, and we 100% confident this is the very best thing to do, this is going to improve safety, this is going to create economic opportunity, this is just going to be the bee's knees, like this is the best possible thing we could potentially do. But if there were overwhelming opposition or considerable opposition, then that's where, if we can't sell that narrative or explain that narrative, that proper narrative, to get people to understand why, then that's when you yield. From my perspective, you yield. Because at the end of the day, we are a representative democracy. And our residents, and the focus is on our residents, they exercise their sovereignty through us, the elected officials. And if our residents overwhelmingly opposed to it, no matter how great it is, then in my opinion, we yield. Now, I'm certainly supportive of further exploration, looking at grant opportunities, bringing proposals forward, further planning. Like, I'm not opposed to that. But if you were to say, put me on the spot right now, say yay or nay, are we going to do a road dot or not? I'd say no. But I welcome further planning and visioning and exploration of grant opportunities, whether it's to be used for this section or Moses Jones Parkway or whatnot. But this is my further thoughts, and I think I'm done with my thoughts. But Commissioner Cochin?
Thank you. So before Jay raised his hand, I was about to raise mine and say almost the exact same thing. My biggest concern is that we are a growing city. And like the mayor, Commissioner Kilgo, and Vice Mayor Sinclair have said, we don't necessarily know what it's going to look like in 10 years. But my concern is that we are going to be growing. And my concern is our pedestrians, our bikers, and our vehicles, and the ability for emergency vehicles to get where they need to go. So I want to make sure that we're intentional moving forward and listening to the feedback of the citizens, and as well as, keeping an eye on the traffic and the patterns and seeing where they're going.
Thank you, Commissioner Cochin. Any final thoughts over here? Commissioner German.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I was opposed to this from the very beginning, and unapologetically, I stand with that because, again, my question was why and how is it going to benefit the community and the citizens? Now, as to projects in the past, like the Western and Muskegon, we had those conversations and dialogue and engage the community, how that would better tie in to downtown with the residential area. But also you had a school there. And I look at the safety as well as this here. Now, I like the fact that you mentioned that there's some things that could have been put in place, like to show the public that, okay, we're putting these initiatives in place to, as a segue to say, hey, okay, if we do a road diet, you have some mechanisms in place. We're going to get there. We don't know what it's going to look like, but the data is going to reflect this. And as for Director, can't think of your name now. Vendor, forgive me. Okay, but what is it? Dan. Vendor. Yeah. Dan.
You can't say mine
well,
either. It's okay.
Anyway, I commend you on what you're doing, and your efforts, to let you know it's not going unnoticed. I really appreciate that. I'm just not sold right now. And having an invested interest in the city all my life, where at one time you didn't have a representation of my race or background, anyone from my culture that represent the city and that hears from the commission in those areas. I listen to them, and I definitely are willing to hear from the community. I would say continue the data, and who knows what may happen later. But at this point in time, I'm just really not in favor right now, because I really don't know if the Department of Transportation would even okay it also. And that's another reason why I'm not sold as well. But I am concerned with the safety, and I understand that how it could improve and connect the downtown with the waterfront and stuff like that as well. So,
Thank you, Commissioner
Yeah.
German. Any final thoughts, Commissioner Keener or Commissioner Gorman? Okay. Good? No?
All right.
Any final thoughts, Mr. Manager?
No, I'm good. Thank
No?
you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you being here tonight, presenting, and all the work that you've done on this process and study, and conversing with us this evening. It's
So,
good, productive, I think, conversation.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share what we had learned. The dialogue tonight was fantastic. Hearing some in favor, some opposed, some neutral, really says to me that we've provided some information, but there's more work to do, right? And this may not be the ultimate outcome at the end of the day, but let's be intentional. Let's know what the city wants to look like in 10 years. Let's do the things now so that we're going to be who we want to be.
Indeed, here. Well, thank you very much. So we're going to take a brief 5-minute break.
Concur.
5-minute recess. Good evening, good folks, and we are resuming, post brief intermission, we are resuming the City of Muskegon City Commission work session for this March 11th, 2024. So next item is short-term rental enforcement and a temporary pause, being presented by City Management and Public Safety Director.
Yes. So I'm going to take the lead on reading this out. So we did have a work session item on this last month where we talked about some of the results from the short-term rental analysis that we've been doing over the past year. And we did have a couple different recommendations, one of which is the updated handbook and registration process for current STRs. That will be on the agenda as one item tomorrow night. We did talk about that previously, so we're not going to spend too much time talking about that that registration process, as it's something that we've already dove into a bit. Then at our legislative policy meeting earlier last month, I think about what month it was, a couple weeks ago, we talked about short-term rentals again, and the desire on the part of the commission to have a couple of different options before them. So one of those options that we discussed was a targeted pause in registrations for new short-term rentals. This would not impact existing short-term rentals, and this would be in areas outside of the DDA and business districts. So it would only be in residential districts. There would also be it would be in place for 180 days, which would expire if it were to be adopted tomorrow. Would expire September 8th, 2024. With the option to extend for another 180 days, which would be for a year. And as noted before, the pause would be specific to residential districts outside of the DDA. I did distribute to the commission, and if the clerk's office could put up on the screen a map that shows what those districts are. But the commission does have in front of them an 11 by 17 map of the impacted areas. So the areas that are shown in various colors on this map are the areas that we would allow new short-term rental registration during the pause. The DDA is in orange, and then the browns, blues, greens, and reds are business districts that exist throughout the city, where these would also be allowed. These are primarily on major roads such as Getty, Laketon, areas off of Henry Street, through the Lakeside District as well. That business corridor would also be included in allowable areas for new short-term rentals during the pause. This would also provide a mechanism for individuals who have already initiated a home purchase or improvements on a property with the intention of starting an STR at the time that this was put in place. They could do an application to the city, a pretty straightforward letter just explaining when they purchased a property, when they got permits and things of that nature. And the city manager's office could then allow that property or individual to continue to move forward through the short-term rental process, even if they're in a residential district. However, if anyone was to go and purchase a property after the moratorium was in place, or want to change their structure to a short-term rental that wasn't already, they would have to wait until after the pause was done. So we wanted to make sure that, per the commission's direction from that conversation, we wanted to make sure that if we were to put a pause in place, it was structured in a way that didn't penalize folks who are already in process, who maybe have already had a contingent offer accepted on a home with the intention of, or property, I should say, with the intention of making that into a short-term rental. We don't want to cause a sale to fall through, and then making sure that we have a process that they can go through that's consistent. I also passed out to the commission, this is just a draft because this would be a staff administrative function, what kind of the practice would look like, and this is based on a review that was done in, I believe it was Summit County, Colorado. Yeah. when they put a pause into place, this is loosely based on what they did, and looking at the process that we would go through. So the special exception could be applied for in the first 60 days of the pause. The thought being there that folks who are already in process will give them time to get through that. The application would be a simple letter to the city manager's office, looking for the name, address, phone number, the pertinent contact information, if you will, the name of the applicant or responsible party, the address of the property with the zoning, the date the property was acquired, and then the list of current permits, and then how far they're at through the process at this point, if they're doing a remodel, if they're going through a purchase, and then just a short request of why they're requesting the special exemption. That review would need to be done by me or one of my a designee of mine within 10 business days of that being received. If we needed additional information, that could be extended by 5 business days. So trying to keep this short so you're not keeping folks who are investing in our community waiting around for answers. And really the key circumstances we're looking for, I've already hit on this a bit, was property was in the process of being purchased at the time the pause went into place. Work is already being done on the home, and these aren't, this isn't and, it's ors in most cases. Permits have been issued and work has been started. And then looking at the work that's been completed to date on the property. And I did put a note on here that once we get this done, one of the notes on here is that ownership of the property at the time of the pause is put into place does not necessarily meet the criteria to be granted for a special exemption. And one of the examples that I gave when I was talking to the vice mayor earlier today was, say, a family had owned a house for years and they had intended to make it into a short-term rental at some point in the future. That wouldn't necessarily meet the criteria here, but we'd have to wait till after the pause. But if there's a sale that's going through, that would be a little bit of a different circumstance. The other big thing with this is if the city manager's office denies the special administrative review, it is appealable to the city commission, and it's not a public hearing or anything like that. It would just be an item for the commission to consider, where the applicant could come in and plead their case, if you will, to the commission regarding a decision that they disagreed with that I would make. So the objective of the pause is to allow us to put into place through the resolution that's on here. It's to look at different options that we can put into place regarding zoning or other enforcement mechanisms to limit the impact or manage the impact of short-term rentals throughout the community in a consistent way. And so by having the pause, it allows us to make sure that we're keeping our arms around the number of short-term rentals as we implement those changes. So that's kind of a high-level version of what this resolution would do. I can read the resolution. It's not very long, but I don't know if there's... Okay.
And if commissioners would like to have it read, certainly we can do that. But no, thank you for that explanation. And moreover, thank you for you and your team for your work on crafting this temporary pause. I do believe that it's done well. I think it's fair and sensible and balanced, and one that I will support as we continue our review and updating, comprehensive update of our short-term rental policies and regulations. I know some of which we're looking at adopting tomorrow, and other elements of it still need some work and time and engagement to complete. And so I do think it's appropriate to have this temporary pause on new permitting in the meantime, and the parameters and the contours of that pause as you presented are well considered. Thank you.
I just want to note one thing really quick here. For some reason, the way this PDF rendered, the DDA district got moved north and east slightly. So if you'll notice, Adelaide Point specifically is an easy one to point out in the bottom left-hand corner. Mm-hmm. That should be scooted down. Something happened when I saved it. I apologize. So
little misalignment, just the orange piece.
Yeah, just the orange piece. So my apologies on that.
So, commissioners, questions or thoughts? This time, Commissioner Cochin.
So the first thing that popped out at me when I was reading this was the sentence that says to allow the city time to analyze and address the impacts of short-term rentals that may have with the community. What exactly, besides the zoning recommendations, do you think we would be looking at? Is that something that we could discuss, or is that not something that you can answer tonight?
I don't know if that's something I can necessarily answer tonight. It would be, I think that's one of the questions that the commission has asked that we look at is what other things can we do outside of the zoning? And I don't know exactly what that would be right now.
Okay. And just a follow-up question to that. So this pause would take effect today. And so if I say I wanted to go put in an application tomorrow, I would have to file for that exemption process. Is that my understanding?
Correct.
Okay.
So,
Thank
and
you.
it would go into a place tomorrow. It would go in place whenever you guys voted for it. But then
Yes,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. So yeah.
Do you have anything else?
Not at this
Okay.
time, yeah.
I just wanted to piggyback on that right quick, because I was wanted to get some clarity in our last conversation. Is that when this is approved, let's say the commission does, for the sake of this hypothetical situation, let's say the city commission does approve this tomorrow. Does this go into effect the day of, or is it like other zoning changes where it needs to be published, and then 10 days after the notice of adoption is published, that it then goes into effect? Did we get confirmation whether or not there's that publishing and then 10 days, or if it would be going into effect or if it would have immediate effect?
So the paragraph J states it would have immediate effect.
Okay. I see that in there, but I wanted
Yeah.
to get confirmation. So legal counsel did confirm that.
Legal counsel wrote the resolution.
They wrote it. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. Because that was one of the questions we had with LPC, and I did not hear
Yep.
a verdict on that. So I wanted to get confirmation. Thank you. Commissioner Kilgo.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, Mr. Manager. So this proposed moratorium is in fact for 6 months or is in fact for 12 months?
It is for 6 months with the option to extend to 12. It would have to be an action of the commission to extend it beyond that. The commission could also, if it so chose, if we came with proposals to that we thought were sufficient, could also choose to lift the registration pause early.
Okay. My next question is, realistically, and I understand that I'm a new commissioner and I wasn't here because we've been talking about short-term rentals prior to the new commissioners taking office. How long for the city staff to put in place enforcement or zoning? If the staff in your office created some comprehensive enforcement policies, we could bring it to our next meeting or the meeting after that. Like, it doesn't have to be necessarily 6 months from now.
Correct. I think as far as enforcement goes, a lot of enforcement policies can go into effect rather in a shorter time window than zoning changes. So zoning changes would have to go through, I'd say, a minimum of about a 2-month process, and that just has to go through the planning commission, and then public hearing there, and then coming to the city commission. Then depending on the vote, it might have to go through 2 readings. So if you just want to be conservative, it would be 2 months from the time introduced by staff till the time that it's adopted, and then with publication deadlines. Regulations are a little bit different. Tomorrow night through the manual, we'll be enforcing new regulations at that point, including registration fees, the 3-strike policy, things of that nature will be part of what you guys do tomorrow. But I think what we're trying to determine regarding the zoning aspects of it are, some communities, if you take Ludington, for example, From a zoning perspective, they took a very detailed approach regarding the number of short-term rentals per block and per street, depending the street that it's fronting. So what I would anticipate is that the staff would probably come to the commission with a couple different options. One of the things that we'd already discussed was doing overlay districts throughout the city and having caps in those areas. That could be the approach that we take. We want to make sure that whatever approach we end up taking is going to have the desired effect that we want, which is probably going to take us a little bit more time to do the research to back that up to make those informed decisions.
Okay. So if all current STRs, like if I had a 2023 short-term rental, I'll be able to continue with my business as long as I paid my fees for this year. Tomorrow we're looking at increasing rental registration, signed applicant, notarized letter of authorization. So we're looking to make some changes to some of the fees and enforcements tomorrow.
Correct.
Since current short-term rentals will be able to continue business, and we have the option of making some changes to our fees and enforcements tomorrow, in the downtown district, and I'm assuming on this map, the blue and red, or just the blue or just the red, is that the business districts?
All areas on this map that are highlighted in a color are either the DDA district or one of our 4 business districts. So the pause would not apply in those areas. And I do want to point out that in some communities, they only allow STRs in business or commercial districts or their DDA. So even with our pause, we're being more flexible than what many communities already allow for STRs.
Okay, thank you. So the moratorium will not affect the orange and the highlighted color areas of this map. We have the option to put in make enforcement changes and fee changes tomorrow. If we put a moratorium in place or a pause in place, is that really going to affect the short-term rental issue that certain parts of our community are having issues with?
I believe it's so I guess I'll preface this by saying that this pause that we're having a discussion on is being brought to the commission for discussion at the request of the commission to have an option. And so from where I'm sitting as the manager and from the team, I believe that we see short-term rentals as kind of there's 2 aspects to this that are impacting residents that we've been hearing from. One of which is challenges with the existing short-term rentals that are there, which the enforcement manual that we're going to be passing tomorrow night attempts to address that challenge by having the 3-strike policy, by increasing fees, by having requirements for what needs to be posted in the home, the type of information that the property owner needs to agree to pass on to the rental owners and things of that nature as a rental owner. And then this other aspect of it, the pause, is to pause new rentals coming into neighborhoods where there already are many short-term rentals, and it's having an impact on the quality of life for individuals, which is a little bit more of an intangible aspect to the short-term rental situation. And that was, what we've been hearing from some of our community members is how that impacts, kind of their day-to-day life. And so the proposals that we had brought forward previously, there was concern that it might not have the full effect that maybe some on the commission or some in the public were looking for. So this was another option that we were bringing forward to consider, to help bring forward a more detailed or surgical approach to managing short-term rentals citywide going forward.
So two last things for me. One is a comment, one is a question. The comment is, so there are other neighborhoods other than our ones closest to Lake Michigan that will be affected by a moratorium. Meaning that if somebody wanted to get right off the highway, off of Apple or Laketon, and have an STR right there for convenience, they wouldn't be allowed to if they're not in these color sections. My question is, just for clarification, tomorrow this commission can vote to put enforcements in place, but they can also vote to not have a moratorium. Is that correct?
Correct. So those will be two separate action items on the agenda. They're back to back, but the first one I believe is the new enforcement structure. The second one is the moratorium. You are not obligated to vote for either or both, or any combination thereof.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgo. Commissioner Cochin?
Can, City Manager, can you please elaborate on that last sentence that you just said, that the commission is not obligated to vote on either of those or both of those? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah. So you could vote yes or no on both of them, on neither of them, or any combination, because they're two separate items.
But you will have to vote.
That's what I was
yes,
thinking. Okay, I
yes,
was like-
yes. Sorry, yes, you do have to vote.
Okay, yes.
But you can vote yes or no. So.
The only instance in which you can abstain
Yeah.
from a vote at this city commission is, one, you have a disclosed conflict of interest in which you need to abstain, or two, you wish to abstain because you lack particular information. So it can't be like you missed the last meeting and you weren't part of the conversation. That is not a justification for abstaining, but you are missing specific information to make an informed decision, in which case you need to disclose what that information is that you need in order to make that informed decision.
Thank you. Yeah, when I heard that, I was like, I don't think that that's right. I just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Commissioner Keener.
Quick question. Couple of emails about the reporting process, because I know that tied into a good deal of the short-term rental in certain portions of the city, and people are having a difficult time finding the reporting process and would prefer not to waste dollars in calling 911. Is it some way that we can fix that to where in our drop-down menu it's very easy to access? Because I've even had emails about people trying to search it and being taken other places. And I know it's a grace for grace situation. Please forgive, because we are ever learning and we're growing very, 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 very fast. But is it some type of way so that accurate numbers can be reported? Because there are citizens who feel like numbers are not getting reported accurately, because they prefer not to call in the 911 route and prefer to just report. Can we do something about that?
I don't know if Deborah can come up to the podium. So the reporting structure is on Connect Muskegon. I believe that's currently closed, but we can open that back up. And can we just put a link to short-term rental reporting on the website's homepage? Yes. Okay.
Talk about those things. So I'm Deborah Sweet, the Community Engagement Manager. As you guys know, our Connect Muskegon platform is new within the past year. That is technically a separate website than our city's website. So that is different keywords and searchability functions. And actually today, our wonderful IT team put on some new keywords on the website based off of the feedback that we received, to ensure that those keywords are now functional through our city's website. So if you search on our search bar function and you search short-term rentals, or STR or STR incident, it'll pull up our Connect Muskegon page. That has always been accessible through our Connect Muskegon portal. And then I also did some search functions today on Google. And if you search STR, STR report, STR incident through Google, it comes up on the first page, usually the first listing, if not one of the first 4 listings. So hopefully a lot of those search functionalities are solved as of today, but that has been available. And as the manager noted, we can open that short-term rental incident form for as long as we want to. My understanding is that we originally had it open through the end of 2023. We then closed it at that point, took in the data, allowed staff to continue to collect data and review it. We decided to open it back up, and we just pushed it out basically through this meeting so we could, again, collect that data and report on it.
And I just did a search on the website and it did come up right
Okay.
away.
Excellent.
So
Thank you.
Thank you,
To you
Deborah.
and IT for being responsive to the public.
We were
Feedback
working
and
on it. It was
concern.
just taking some time.
Grace for grace.
Yes.
good question.
Any other questions?
Any follow-up, Commissioner Keener?
I just had, not for Deborah, just one more question about the DDA portion, that downtown area. Now, are long-term residents there, are they quite comfortable with it just kind of being open for short-term rentals there? Has there been any kind of comment, question, concern?
So I'll qualify this by saying I am a resident in the DDA. As is Commissioner Gorman. We haven't noticed as many or received as many complaints. Actually, I'm not aware of any in the DDA, 0 in the DDA. There's also the nature of the DDA is a bit different. There's folks are accustomed to people coming down there for events at the Frohenthal or the arena, going out to eat, things of that nature. So it's just a little bit different nature than it would be in a neighborhood.
Okay.
So that was one of the reasons that we were comfortable having the DDA as an option for short-term rentals, because it just because of its nature. And there's things for folks who are using short-term rentals to walk to within the DDA. So it sort of seemed like a natural fit. Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm inclusive, and I'm just not, concerned about the little communities, but,
Thank you, Commissioner Keener. Commissioner Koshin, did you have something?
Yes, so Commissioner Kilgo had brought up the pause and when that would take effect, and that there's not that 10-day delay. Is there an option to give a delay or no?
Technically the commission could amend the resolution as it so saw fit. I believe, the staff's recommendation, and I think, and I don't want to speak for Ben or John as far as legal counsel goes, but I think having the definitive date, because what we wouldn't necessarily want is to have a right to get in under the wire. What we're trying to do is hit the pause button and then have a structure in place for folks who might get caught up in that pause to have a navigation way forward. So the way that this is structured, anyone who has done investment or is in the process of doing investment has a relief valve to be able to approach the city and go through that process. And I do want to put a caveat there. The only thing this process does is they can then take that approval from the city or from the city manager's office to the building department. And so when they come into the building department to go through the short-term rental process, one of the questions would be, were you registered last year, yes or no? They can answer that pretty quickly. And then if no, do you have a letter exempting you from the pause from the city manager's office or the city commission? If the answer is yes, then they just move forward. Mm-hmm. So anyone who's already doing investment is going to have an option to move forward.
So from a process perspective, if we were to adopt this temporary pause, the day it goes into effect throughout the next 6 months, if someone wished to apply for a permit, they would go to SafeBuilt, try to apply for it. SafeBuilt's like, no, we're not accepting applications for new permits, in which case they'd be referred to the city manager's office to appeal that denial of acceptance of a permit.
Well, if it wouldn't be necessarily a denial of a permit or appeal, it would be in that first 60 days, they would have to approach the city manager's office with evidence that they had started that investment process prior to the pause going into effect, and then they could go to the building department to get that. I'm sure that they're logistically, I'm sure some people will go into the front desk there, talk to the ladies who are very knowledgeable, and they'll say, hey, this is in place. Hey, if you've already started investing, if you've already done permits, which the building department's going to know, they say, go across the hall.
So
and-
people in the know can skip the safe bill and just go straight
Yes,
to you.
exactly. People, yeah.
Because the way I was reading it was like, the city shall not issue permits, and so I was like, if someone were to apply,
Yeah.
they'd be told no.
Well,
But
and
they'd
they
have
and
to
they
then go to
and
you.
yes, they would be, but then the building department could say like, was the property going through a sale at that point in time? Here's some options. You can go talk to the city manager's office, or if you're in the DDA or one of the business districts, it doesn't apply.
Gotcha.
And the DDA is a pretty big footprint within the city.
Yeah, and
So,
I presume, we want to welcome
Yes.
accommodations
Yep.
within our DDA. We have 2 hotels within our DDA, potentially, a third and a fourth one coming.
Yep.
And so the more accommodations, the better to support our downtown businesses. And I know some short-term rental owners and operators who have done great work on redeveloping properties within the DDA. For accommodation purposes. One other caveat, though, as I understand it, is an owner-occupied short-term rental would not be impaired or prevented from operating during the pause. That's treated differently under present
yes,
regulations.
that's
if
treated
you own your
differently.
home and you want to rent out a room
and you're living there,
it's owner-occupied. That's a different category than you've got a separate standalone property that you're trying to use as a short-term rental.
That's correct. That includes ADUs. Accessory dwelling units
on site. So if you got a mother-in-law suite or quote mother-in-law suite. Commissioner Cochin.
A follow-up question to that, city manager. So this has obviously been in the news. We've seen it on MLive. Have we seen an increase in applications coming in through SafeBelt?
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions or
Question,
comments at
Mayor.
this time? This is on our agenda for tomorrow as well. Commissioner German.
Yes, city manager could provide me this information if you have it off your head. How many short-term rentals do you know that we have downtown in the district? Do you have any idea, just roughly estimate or?
I'd probably say it's about 25.
Okay.
That maybe actually no. I'm probably closer to 30.
Okay.
But it could be a little bit higher than that because there's some in the Leonard. There's Dream Stay on Clay. There's Brett's
Heritage.
building. Yeah.
Train
Oh
Depot.
yeah. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So. Yeah, the old Heritage. Oh yeah, that's true.
A new one right down in the back alley of the Heritage.
Yep. Yeah, right over here. So it could be closer to.
Okay, and those
Yeah.
are buildings that's in the process of reconstruction.
Those ones
They're already
are
operating.
they're already operating.
Yeah. Oh, they are. Okay.
Yeah, there's only one in the DDA that I'm aware of that's in process, so they wouldn't be impacted. But there could be others. But there's one I'm thinking of specifically just down the street from me. So.
One last question. Okay, and just kind of refresh my memory. How did we get here? Why didn't we just put the pause on everything instead of just kind of like, spot pick here, spot pick there?
Well, the reason we didn't put a pause on everything was we were looking at a way that was going to have the desired impact that we were looking for, and by not applying it to the business districts in the DDA, it still allows for some options for the short-term rental market to move forward in those areas while we look at the areas of the community where we've heard the most feedback about where it's being negatively impactful. And so this was the best way to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner German.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts before we wrap this up? This is under new business tomorrow. Commissioner Gorman.
Thank you. So, I want to start by saying thank you so much to staff for putting in an incredible amount of time for this proposal for us to vote on tomorrow. I guess before I get transparent about what I'm thinking as far as to vote tomorrow, I was not on the commission in 2019 when the commission, as stated in this resolution, voted to adopt an ordinance requiring the registration and inspection of STRs. When I look at this resolution, my concern is things like in paragraph G, the city and its consultants will need time to complete the process. Fine. Next paragraph, the pause on short-term rental vacation registrations is being entered in good faith, blah, blah, with the expectation of diligence and swift action to address the need. Defining what swift action is. Like, if we have some clear definitions tonight of, like, yes, on October 1st, we are going to be able to decide something to permanently move forward in enforcement. Like, I'm very excited for that. I'm really concerned with the amount of time we've put to potentially move forward tomorrow with so many carve outs that, again, I know our team took so much time to be intentional about, but ultimately I don't know if it's moving us forward in a decision. And I would then rather us use more time to make a decision on what we're going to do instead of deciding tomorrow to just give us more time to essentially do nothing. And I mean, acknowledging that I'm very excited about this handbook we have now. I'm very excited about the dialogue we've had with some of our neighbors in the west part of our community. And I think that we can, ahead of the season, hopefully now there's more tools in place for enforcement of any issues that come about. But I'm not able to be really excited about voting for this tomorrow because I'm not sure it's actually doing anything. So, yeah, sorry.
So I guess my follow up to that would be what we've been looking at so far had really been focused on enforcement. We'd been hearing that, you know, we weren't enforcing things. There wasn't, however you want to unpack that. What we discovered through deep dives into the reporting was that it wasn't an enforcement issue. It was, if we want to have a meaningful impact from what we were hearing back from the community, it was a zoning issue. It was a zoning solution that we were going to have to look at. And since we haven't really spent too much time looking at the zoning solution, that's why we wanted to pause, so that we were kind of knowing the universe that we were working with as we were moving forward with that zoning solution. Because there are, as I kind of alluded to before, there are a lot of different ways that different communities have handled the zoning issue, whether it's caps, whether it's limits on the number that can be next to each other on a certain, facing a certain street or backing up to one another. There's all these different factors that go into play. One of the factors that we have to look at is, where do we currently have the short-term rentals? How many do we have? And if we put, X cap here, should it be the same across all areas of the city? Should there be discrete caps in different sections of the overlay? Can we impact things on a zoning perspective for numbers on streets and things of that nature? So I think because we had really been looking at this from an enforcement perspective, that was kind of some of the feedback that we were getting. This is a little bit of a different animal. So
yeah, no, thank you. And I guess I should have clarified at the end of that. Again, I do feel like our staff has been responsive to what the commission wants. I'm just hoping to challenge my peers on the commission that we could be more direct of like what we are looking for to learn from this season, so we can be more clear about making policy that we want to see in the city moving forward, and being very intentional then, I guess, about this season. Because if we're being vague about what swift action is, if we're being vague about just this pause, and I don't understand what we're doing then, really. So again, that's to my colleagues on this commission, to give our team more direction about what we're looking for. If we are deciding collectively that we want to move down a path to, again, make some more clear policies for short-term rentals in the future. And I understand that we tend to want more information to make a better decision. I totally get that, but I even think then the information we're looking for could be more intentional about this season to get to an outcome we're looking for, or find out that the outcome we were searching for is not ultimately what we wanted. That's my real concern here.
Thank you, Commissioner Gorman. And I would agree that in the sense that this is an opportunity for us just to kick the can down the road, and 5 months from now, we're like, oh yeah, now let's sit down and talk about.
Yeah.
No, like this is a 6-month window that we may end up, if the commission approves it, we then would have an opportunity to end it sooner. And I do believe, and I think if we were to adopt this tomorrow, there needs to be that expectation that we are moving swiftly and that we're not just going to, wait months. That we're going to be having those intentional conversations and refining those policies. So staff has presented a few different policy options for going forward, and we as a commission need to be discussing and drilling down into those policy options. And if it is caps, what do those caps look like? Is it a cap citywide? Is it a cap by zone? Is it a cap by neighborhood? Is it a proximity restrictions rather than a specific cap in a particular neighborhood or a particular zone, and what do zones look like and how do they function? Are zones where you have caps or zones where you're going to say, nope, it's similar like to DDA, you can have as many as you want within that particular zone or not. So like we do need to have that conversation about refining the policy and what exactly we're looking to adopt going forward. We've had some of that conversations in the past. We've been doing this process for over a year now, and there was an expectation that we would have a comprehensive policy update by now, and we're not in that position. We're moving forward with some good improvements, but we're just not quite there yet with everything. That's why personally I think it's prudent to have a pause while we're wrapping that comprehensive policy update up, because there's a potential concern that if we are looking at caps, let's say we want to put a particular cap in this zone or this section of the city, that people knowing that we're looking at that and going to be likely adopting that cap, there's going to be, if we don't have a pause, there's going to be a pressure. Let me get in there now and buy up, get this started in that particular area that could exceed the cap. In which case they would be a legacy property and operator that even if they exceeded the cap, we would not be able to say, well, nope, you're exceeding the cap. You're gone. Your permit's gone. Like we would not be able to take that permit away. And so that's one of the reasons in my mind for having that pause. Of course, there's the quality of life component that ties into, and then the housing situation. But those are my thoughts. Commissioner Kilgo.
Thank you. I'm going to push back on that last point just a little bit, Mr. Mayor. I would encourage the manager's office and staff to look at the housing stock throughout our city. For instance, right now in the Bluffton neighborhood, which probably has the most short-term rentals, there's 0 houses on the open market. There are a couple in escrow right now. I talked to a citizen today actually who has a house in escrow, and he's concerned about being able to do whatever he wants to do with his property. But in certain particular neighborhoods, people aren't just going to be able to go and buy up. As you move closer to downtown, there's a few more in Lakeside, then a few more in Nims, so on and so forth. Then there's more houses on the open market as you move to the east side. I would encourage staff to think about, if they do a cap system, set the numbers. Whatever you guys feel, set the numbers, bring it to commission, we'll talk about it, we'll set them in place. Numbers can always be changed. Hey, that's not enough for this neighborhood. I think we should increase it. I think that's too many for this neighborhood, and next year we'll set it at this, and the first 50 people, or if somebody's legacy'd end or whatever, however we decide to do it, we do it. But again, this would be things to push that forward sooner so that it doesn't drag out past a certain time. But as far as like right now, and for those that don't know, like as spring comes, the real estate market comes, so you'll see more houses hit the market soon. But just to look at the data numbers on, okay, what does this neighborhood, on average, how many homes come up for sale in this neighborhood versus this neighborhood, and look at how many short-term rentals are in certain neighborhoods, and just set caps. Again, I personally don't think that means that we put a stop on it, because like I said, if somebody wants to has plans and they're waiting for that market to to ramp up and they say, hey, I want to buy a house in this neighborhood, and that was their plans for this year, then we're putting a stop to potentially somebody taking a blighted house or a house that's average and then putting a lot of money into it and making it brighter and better for our community.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgo. I would just add, on the flip side of that same coin, I know of folks who are very much interested in living in certain sections of our city and are wanting to buy and be permanent residents. And every opportunity they have gets taken away because there's somebody wanting to turn it into an investment property or short-term rental and buying it, sight unseen and for above offer. And so we have people wanting to be permanent residents who are not getting that opportunity. And so I do understand the side of the coin you're sharing, but I just wanted to give that flip side
For sure.
perspective as
And
well.
business is not a protected class. So if I'm a seller of a house and I live in Bluffton or I live in Lakeside, I don't have to sell my home to somebody that says that they want to buy it and turn it to a short-term rental. That's not a protected class, so I can discriminate and say, nope, I want a family to live here because that's who's always lived here. And our sellers in these neighborhoods who are selling the homes do have the option to say, are you going to live here? Are you going to be an owner occupant? There's some stuff we can't ask about, and that's great. I'm glad. But business class is not one of them. So hopefully people who are looking to sell their properties this year, if they want to keep it a neighborhood or something like that, ask some questions to your whoever's helping you sell your property. And hopefully that will help also if people want to say, hey, I want a family to live here.
Thank you, Commissioner Hugo. I see you, Commissioner Coach, in just a second. I think I saw Vice Mayor St. Clair. She hasn't spoken yet, so I want to give her the opportunity.
So, as I've said before, we've been talking about this for several years now, and I think going back to what I was referencing when we were talking about the results of the road diet pilot, that we frequently as a community allow change to happen to us rather than driving the change. And I think this process has been different in that we have been deliberate in trying to get a handle from the community's voice on what they would like to see happen in the community that they live and they invest and that they want to continue in. I think that short-term rentals absolutely have a place in our community, and that it is important to make sure that we foster that. But I also think that it is very important for people who have made an investment to live in a neighborhood that they get to continue to live in the sort of neighborhood that they chose to buy into. And it is an indisputable fact that many people have come to us to tell us that I don't feel like I live in the same neighborhood that I bought my house in anymore. And that is in fact because I don't live in the same neighborhood that I did. Now I live in a neighborhood where all around me is vacation rentals and short-term rentals, and I don't think that we can ignore that. I also am not unsympathetic to business owners who want to have a thriving business. And we regulate businesses differently than we do neighborhoods. And, you know, one of the things that I really like about this plan is it does open up the business corridors specifically to investment. You know, you talk about people want to buy a blighted house and flip it. Buy a blighted commercial building and fill it up. That has been incredible to watch. Some of these really creative projects. There is so much opportunity to make this community better, and it isn't it isn't necessary to narrow that focus down to the neighborhoods where people live. You know, I don't think that this has been a rushed process, and I also don't think that we've been dragging our feet. We've been very deliberate in how we've gone forward. We have taken tons of time and opportunity for community feedback, and the feedback's been pretty clear that people want to live in a neighborhood if they wanted to live in a neighborhood. I don't think a 6-month pause is too high of a standard to hold. You know, I think if somebody has a business plan, they're going to have a business plan in 6 months. And if they've already made the investment, then they're going to get their permit. And, you know, I don't think that this is going to be the hardship that we could, that we could say it's going to be. I feel like there's enough safety valves built in that people can both get their needs met for their business opportunities and still feel like we as a commission and as a city are listening to them when they say, I don't like how my neighborhood feels anymore. Can you please help me? That's all.
Thank you, Vice Mayor St. Clair. So to wrap this up, we've been going on for a while. Final thoughts, and I just want to share right now because this is on the agenda tomorrow night, and so we don't necessarily need to be deliberating like yay or nay on this because we'll have that opportunity tomorrow night before we vote to like this is why we should support it or this is why we shouldn't support it or this is why we should change it. So I just want to give that context for this conversation. But welcome to final thoughts or questions for staff about the proposed temporary pause. Commissioner Cochin.
One of the questions I have is, so in regards to the business districts, our current zoning, would that allow you to go down and purchase a commercial building and actually turn it into a short-term rental? Because I thought my understanding of the zoning, even in those commercial areas, was that would require a PUD. Isn't that correct?
Director Franzik, come up.
Good evening. So residential uses are always allowed as part of commercial districts. So just if there's a commercial space there, there's sometimes extra space that could be converted, whether it's in the back or up top for residential units. So there's a lot of commercial buildings that have the potential to host both a commercial space and a unit, a residential unit.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Franzik. Any final comments and questions?
I'll hold mine for tomorrow.
Okay. Tomorrow it is then. All right. Well, we're done with that. Mr. Manager, do you have any final thoughts or any other items that you wish to touch on before we wrap up tonight's meeting?
No, I appreciate the conversation and the questions. So we're trying to provide a product that the commission can respond to and we'll carry forward the will that the commission votes tomorrow.
I will say I appreciate what is in this because I feel like it answers a gazillion emails that I have received and have not been quite able to answer. And so if you're watching, please tune in tomorrow and see this because it does answer so many questions that so many people have concerns about.
Thank you. Well, that brings us to public comment now. So if you wish to give public comment, I should have said at the beginning of the meeting, sorry I was remiss, in that there are public comment forms at the back room that you are encouraged to complete and provide your name and home address. Note I will not be sharing your home address, nor will I be asking you to provide your home address publicly, but we do need to have that address for our records. And so when called upon, you'll have up to 3 minutes to provide your remarks. We do go to the phones as well. So that's after in-person public comment that we'll go to the phones. And whether you're giving input in person or you're giving input by phone, it's 3 minutes regardless. And if you wish, I can call you right now and you can submit the form afterwards. I see somebody completing the form right now. We'll give it a moment. I'll share that phone number too. That phone number is 724-6721. Don't call just yet, but know that that is the number, so be prepared to call in when it is the right time. So I will do the first up, Mr. Randy Vanderwhite, joining us from the McLaughlin neighborhood. Welcome, sir. You have up to 3 minutes to provide your remarks.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Yeah, I would concur that I think taking a pause would be helpful just based on different information I've heard from people. And I guess my encouragement to you as a commission is to use this as an opportunity to help educate the community. I know that when I was here at the last work session and heard a lot of the conversation about, putting regulations in place, I'm like, well, that's not the concern I'm hearing from people. Why don't you just put caps in place? But then as I took a bathroom break and talked to a staff person, that individual was like, I don't know if caps are really the way to go. Perhaps this is the better option. And I've heard also people talk about overlay districts and this or that. So as you educate yourselves on the different options that are out there, please invite us as neighbors into that being educated, because I know I personally would love to learn about the pros and cons of each of the different options that are there. And as you consider different, if we go with a cap and put certain numbers on certain neighborhoods, I guess engage the neighbors in that as to what they might think might be beneficial for their neighborhood. So just want to encourage that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderwhite. I also just want to share with regard to public comment that we will have public comment period towards the beginning of our general session tomorrow, which is before we vote. So if you don't wish to share remarks tonight but want to give remarks tomorrow before we vote, that's another opportunity, whether giving comment in person or by phone. So thank you again, Mr. Vanderwhite. Next up, we have Nancy Holka joining us from the Beechwood Bluffton neighborhood. Welcome. You have up to 3 minutes to provide your remarks.
So a couple weeks ago, our doorbell rang, and I went to the door, and I found a Muskegon High School student selling raffle tickets to raise money for a trip to Washington, D.C. Of course, we bought a couple of tickets. I told the student that I was a Muskegon graduate, and to be sure to go up and down the street because there were many other Muskegon graduates on my street, and they likely would buy a ticket too. This is what it means to live in a community. We support our students, whether it's Big Reds or Boy Scouts selling popcorn or the Boys and Girls Clubs, etc. We support animal rescues and many others. We need residents living in our community who care and support our community and to volunteer at our many nonprofits like we do. We need residents here all year long to support our local services and businesses. But some of us are on the verge of getting pushed out of our neighborhoods and the city we love by the stress and hassle of living near a short-term rental. Some people want to join us and live in the city, but when houses go up for sale, they're bought up at high prices by people running a short-term rental or other commercial operation. This is also a contributing factor to pushing up long-term rents in our area. It seems as though the city has been so eager to attract tourists that we have forgotten about the people who live here and the people who have been dedicated to the city. It seems like historically we've been more concerned about accommodating investors than we have been our residents. Please enact a moratorium on new short-term rentals. Please, more regulation of the short-term rentals that are present now. In the event that those houses are sold, they should be converted back to owner-occupied or long-term rentals to provide housing for residents. Please do this as soon as possible with this moratorium. If the house next to me goes up for sale next week and we don't have this, it's probably going to go for short-term rental and I'll get surrounded. Short-term rentals in commercial districts would be okay because that's a business district anyways. If someone wants to rent out a room in their house, that's okay because they're there. But please, not the unsupervised motels with large groups of noisy strangers coming and going in our R1 residential zone neighborhoods. Keep neighbors in the neighborhood. It says right there on your mission statement to maintain and enhance the neighborhoods of the city. You have it posted right out here on the wall, outside the chambers here. I've been coming here since 2018 talking about this issue. You know, it's been a long time. Please enact this moratorium and maintain and enhance the neighborhoods of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you joining us this evening. Next up, we have Nick Shippers joining us from the city of Grand Rapids by way of a property in our Nelson neighborhood in downtown. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. I just want to thank the commission for all your input and the hard work you've put together. I know I've spoken with the city manager on the phone. A couple of you commissioners also responded to emails that I sent, so thank you for that. I have invested a lot in Muskegon. I don't live in Muskegon, be totally transparent. I have flipped about 17 homes in the last 3 years in Muskegon, all over different neighborhoods. Also have partnered on some properties. I own one other property other than the property that I have that's a concern of mine, or I guess should have been until tonight. I believe where I sit is 460 West Clay is in the DDA. So that was a sigh of relief for me. So because I'm about 6 weeks away from being ready to open. And my location is right next to the Pink House downtown. That's a salon and parlor. I think they have a sauna. They have a couple other things. I know both those owners and have a really good relationship with them. That's something that I pride myself in, is trying to meet the neighbors and trying to work in connection with them, so causing a nuisance by any of my renters. The other property I own is actually on 8th Street in Clay, the Boilermaker. 50% partner with the Puffers on that property, and designed and did a lot of that work myself. We have fought to maintain the historical integrity to it, worked with the HDC, follow all the permit process, follow all the regulations that have been put in place with public safety and all the things you guys have worked on to make sure that we inform our tenants that some of these people are coming from multiple different states for events. And one of the things I want to share is that I believe I fight to try to make it a really good experience for the tenants, but also for the people around the tenants, so the tenants know this is how you act when you're in the city. Obviously, both of those properties are in the DDA, but I understand some of the concerns of the people that live in neighborhoods. Totally get that. I think that one of the passions I've had when I literally knew nothing about Muskegon about 3.5, 4 years ago. I wanted to buy a rental and I wanted to get into real estate. I've only been in real estate for about 3.5 years. I own a painting business in addition to that. That's kind of my bread and butter. But I literally just randomly drove into Muskegon and started driving around to try to learn the neighborhood. Now I know like all the streets like the back of my hand. And I love seeing what's happening. Like I have people that work for me full time that live in Muskegon, even though I'm in Grand Rapids, because I do so much work here. And they're like, "Oh, I had never been to that." I'm like taking them to lunch. I've never been to Rad Dad's. I've never been to Top Shelf. I've never been. So like I see all the things in Muskegon, all the development, and I've met a lot of people. I love the city. I love where I live, so I'm not moving here, but I love what's been able to take place. I just want to say for all the people that are trying to do SDRs, I know I'm running short here, is to, okay. I fall in that district. If I can say one more thing, like what Commissioner Gorman said, is to try to work as quickly as you can if you do this moratorium to get it to make your caps and your decisions for the people that want to continue to invest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shippers. Appreciate you joining us this evening, and thank you for your investments in Muskegon. All right. Anyone else in the audience wishing to give public comment at this time? I'm going to go to the phones. The phone number is 231-724-6721. Again, that's 231-724-6721. And also, you will have an opportunity to give public comment before we get to our agenda items tomorrow night. So it'll be towards the beginning of the meeting. All right. Any phone calls? All right. Commissioners, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Support.
We have motion by Commissioner German, supported by Vice Mayor St. Clair to adjourn. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thank you. Take care and be well.
Thank you.